everyone. Welcome to Aligned Heart. This is Misty Springer, and I'm glad to have you here with me today. And this is one of my favorite things to do in recording this podcast, and also just in the work that I am so privileged to do is I get to interact and rub shoulders with extraordinary women. And Denise is one of my dear friends. We have been on this journey together for, 12, 15 years now. I can't even count. I've lost count over the years. And Denise has been such a beautiful gift in my life. And I have watched her journey into the extraordinary. And I wanted to share Denise with all of you because she has so many beautiful gifts. And I've watched her grow into this extraordinary life that she is living. And there's really key principles and inspiration that comes as we listen to someone else's story. So I hope that you enjoy this episode with Denise and come to love her as much as I do. So welcome, Denise. So happy to
Thank
have you
you.
here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's such a blessing to be here and just to get to experience this with you. Another thing that we get to, just experience and be together on.
Another thing. Yes, exactly. That feels very relevant to our journey. Here we go. Let's try this one. So, Denise, I would love it for my listeners to just hear your story and
Mhm.
where the beginnings of this little niggle in your heart that let you know there's more for me here.
Mhm.
And I would love to hear that journey from that niggle in your heart to where you are now and how that's taken you on a beautiful and unexpected journey, and also the what you had to tap into to stay on that journey and be connected to your purpose.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I have two different starting points. One is, and I don't know that it was a niggle. I guess it might have been, but there was a knowing that I had when I found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I remember then that was a time in life where I knew that something needed to be different. And so, for your audience, I was 19 when I had my first daughter, and as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I had a really strong recognition that I was in a family pattern. And my mom was 17 when she had my brother, and my grandma was 17 when she had my mom, and it was this history, and they weren't married, and I found myself in the same boat. And I looked at their lives, and I knew that was not the trajectory that I wanted for myself. So there was a niggle and a knowing there that I just knew I needed to do something different, and that's all I knew at the time. I didn't know anything else. I just knew I needed to do something different. And then years later, fast forward, I get married, I have two more girls, and I've always been into personal development and personal growth. And so in my previous career, I read a lot of books, and I just remember like getting to a point, I think it was like my early 30s, where I was just like, okay, wait, I feel like I have all of the things that like I was working towards in life and what I thought, this is the steps we're supposed to take. These are the things we're supposed to accomplish, so to speak. And I remembered feeling empty, like, okay, wait, is this, oh my gosh, this can't be it. Is this it? Like if I just repeated this day over and over and over, like there was like a question, but then also like, this isn't it. This isn't it. I know there's more. And so that really kind of started me on this trajectory of questioning a little bit more. And in between and in that is when I remembered something I knew in high school. And that is, I feel like it was placed on my heart. I don't have any other description other than that because I've been thinking about this a little bit, knowing this interview was coming out, as I knew that I was supposed to work with women and children in some capacity. And I didn't really know what that meant or what that looked like. And then that part of my journey started later. And it was fascinating. So, you know, this, I started a career with Mary Kay, and I kind of thought, oh, this is it, right? Like I'm helping women and feel better on the outside, right? Like helping them with their skin and their makeup. And I really enjoyed all of that. Um, and then it, a change came. And this is about the time I met you, just shortly after that, where I decided I would become a health coach. And that has a little bit of a story behind it too. Just there were some personal reasons for that. And it just kind of kept turning into this like vision of like, oh wow, I can see now how that vision from high school is like coming to fruition, all of a sudden through these shifts and these changes. And so it's been quite the journey for sure.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing in this is a concept that I talk a lot about on this podcast and with my clients, which is following the breadcrumbs of yes.
Yes,
And
totally.
yeah, it's just that knowing you can't logically look at it and say, this is the steps that are going to take me where I need to go.
I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there is the knowing and the recognition that the yes is here right now, and I'm taking that next step, following that breadcrumb of yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
And
did
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the important and maybe funny piece about that, I have three daughters now, so all of this is sort of funny for me to look back on. But I was very much an athlete in high school, so I was um, not as excited about the frilliness of having girls when I had my oldest. I'll leave it kind of like that. And then when I moved into a Mary Kay career, I still didn't like the color pink. So it was just sort of funny irony that happened, like I resisted the hug. Like anybody that's been exposed to that world kind of just knows, and maybe it's kind of even a network marketing thing, but lots of hugs exchanged. And I wasn't comfortable with that, at that point in time. And so it was sort of like, what am I doing here at first, because like none of this actually feels like who I am. But here, yes, I'm following it. Just there's something that feels exactly right. And I'm just following that.
Yeah, so as you found yourself on this journey of following the breadcrumbs of yes, what did you have to tap into to keep going? Because I'm sure there were many times, and maybe you can speak to that. What were some of the
Yeah.
obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome those? How did you keep tuning and tapping into that breadcrumb of yes?
Yeah, and I feel like the where I can really see that starting, not that it wasn't there before. I just think it probably would take me a little bit more effort to see it. But I had my Mary Kay business, I think of almost 10 years before I decided to become a health coach. And I honestly thought I was going to be there forever. So once I got into it and I really tapped into the potential and the possibility and I was having success, I loved the company. I loved the retirement plan. So like once you got to a certain level, I loved the retirement plan. It just was like, okay, it just feels like this is where I'm going to hang out for the rest of my life, probably. And then, part of the story with becoming a health coach had to do with my daughter's health. And as we were sorting that out, is when I kind of got the inspiration, I guess you could say, the the idea, the thought, God putting it on my heart that health coaching is something to explore next. And in that, though, there was a little bit of questioning because at the time, I wasn't even aware that health coaching was a thing. I kind of found it on accident. But what was on my heart was like, I've always loved helping people. And I was kind of following that. And people were asking us questions because of what we were doing based on my daughter and different things. And so it was sort of like, I didn't know it then, but I was following the breadcrumbs, trying to find like where is the yes, because there were some no's along the way that I was like, yeah, no, not gonna follow that, because at the time I only thought if I'm gonna help people with their health, it was like become a dietitian and a nutritionist, and I was not interested in going back to school that heavily and for that long. And so those were no's, right? But it was like, okay, there's a yes somewhere, and I'm just searching for it. So I think that's probably the first thing is like knowing it's there and like navigating, right, where is it, and trusting that like when you find it, that this is it, this is the direction. And that's kind of how it was when I discovered health coaching. I was like, that's it. Like it was this knowing that like straightforward, gas on, we're going to go that route. And I would say similarly to that, like there wasn't as much dissatisfaction in that process, but along the way, I experienced dissatisfaction after becoming a health coach. So there were moments where I could identify, for instance, when I moved out of health coaching into more of this transformational life coaching that you and I do, um, there was an element of dissatisfaction of like, okay, I know that there's something else here, and I'm somewhat dissatisfied with what I'm currently doing. And like the dissatisfaction was the messenger, right? Of like, there's something else. And I have found that to just kind of be the thing. So I think we want to dismiss that, right? A lot of times and think there's something wrong, but actually I think it's something that's perfectly right. Cause it's like, okay, God's like, okay, there's a nudge here. I'm nudging you out of the nest. You got comfortable in that nest and now we have a new one built for you. It's time to fly over to the next one, right? And it's like finding that,
Yeah.
flying through the dissatisfaction. Really, I think that that's like when I look at what the journey really looks like, that's what it is, oh, there's dissatisfaction here. Let's look at that and what's next? What's available?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that idea of like getting comfortable in the nest, and then God's like, yeah, like here's this next nest for you. Let's go ahead and nudge you in that direction.
Hmm.
And the discontent or the dissatisfaction, I believe in the concept of divine discontent, that
Yep.
oftentimes that discontent, there is nothing wrong. It's just we're ready for our next nest, and
Hmm.
we're ready to
Yeah.
fly and to learn how to fly in a new way.
Yeah.
Um, so what did you have to let go of to move into from this Mary Kay career that you
Hmm.
thought you were going to be in for the rest of your life? Felt
Yeah.
comfortable, felt good, you felt successful, and trusting that nudge. I'm sure that was scary to take that leap into the
Hmm.
next
Yeah.
nest. So what did you have to let go of, and what did you have to hold on to in order to take that leap?
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually think that was probably the hardest leap for me. I think maybe because I had a lot of attachment to having built the career and finding satisfaction there and the opportunity and making a difference, right? In the way that I was making a difference. I think that like I had to let go of all of those ideas that I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. um, and B, that I'm impacting lives. And even though, I can say for sure I was impacting lives and I would impact lives on the other side, it was just the way in which I was doing it, where I felt connected and just really empowered. And I think anytime, even though you might consciously know you're going to have that ability, at least in our realm, right, to empower people still, there's still a shift, right, in the way you do it, how you do it. And there's a learning curve to all yeah. So I didn't let go a lot of those things, just the thoughts and the attachments around hanging on to what was. And I do think that was the one that took me the longest. To really navigate. Like for a while, even after I started my health coaching, I was kind of like double dipping, like not really sure I was all in on the health coaching, because I was like, gosh, I have to leave this behind, and it's something I built, right? So I think that there's a lot of that, a little bit of that ego that wants to maintain, the identity of success and all the things that kind of come along with that. So I think that that was probably the hardest transition. The first one was
Mhm.
probably the hardest transition. Um, and I think similarly along the way, it's a lot of egotistical ideas of, I think, what success looks like. And I say that like from the frame of reference. I remember once when I was having a little bit of difficulty with time management and just like really managing my business and my family life and feeling kind of stressed around that balance. And I felt like the vision I had, and this kind of gets into a little bit more of, the idea that I knew I needed to do something different with my daughter. And I think I thought for a long time that my vision was so big and so massive that I couldn't rest. I couldn't relax, right? Like there was like I need to always be working. And it started this kind of like a lot of sacrificing of my family life. And I had a very kind coach gently remind me that maybe my purpose was just simply the generational shifts in my own family. And that really helped me. So letting go of like the egotistical idea that I'm here to do something big, as if shifting your own family's generational stuff isn't big, right? As if like I didn't even think about that as like a big deal. And now that is something that I would like really take heart and stock in first and just remember. So I think, yeah, letting go of just where your ego gets attached to some element of uh yeah, I think just success and identity in the outer world, right? And then like coming
Mhm.
back to so yes, of course I help other people do similar things to what I've done, but priority is like coming back to being present with my family and making sure I'm doing that here first.
Mhm. Yeah, I love
So
that. I love that journey and that gentle reminder that perhaps your gift is the generational patterns that you've changed within your own family. And
mhm,
I find that to be true with most of our gifts, that sometimes they feel so natural, it
mhm,
feels they're easy to dismiss,
mhm.
and they're easy to say, well, that one doesn't matter because it's not, it comes so naturally, I don't even really recognize that it's there.
Yeah,
So how
yeah.
has, because that shift, you also have made a shift from health coaching into this transformational life coaching, and how has really recognizing your gift in recognizing and changing generational patterns, how did owning that gift more fully
Mhm.
impact that next leap into the next nest that was ready for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is there is an aspect of the shift and the way I've even parented that's felt very natural, almost like how could that not be my purpose? You know? So before I really answer the question, I just want to explain this because it's been very natural for me to understand. Like I always, even before I had kids, but like I think in some ways kids can heighten various things that we have, internally. And I just really understood, especially with my oldest. And I think, partly I was young, so I was learning and growing with her. I think as we do, all of us do with our first, right? We're like, there's no manual, so we're figuring it out. But I think, age does you get taught a little bit more when you're younger. And so, but one of the things I was really, really understood was that our kids are sensitive to their environment. And I knew that with her especially, and again, I say just because there's a 10-year gap between my oldest and my middle, so there's more life that I learned that anyway. I knew that her behavior was dependent on her environment. At any time she was behaving in a way that I felt like was out of character, I looked at myself first and just really got curious, like, how am I contributing to this? And do I need to course correct? And sometimes it was me directly. Sometimes it was what I was allowing her to do or the people I was allowing her to, be exposed to. And so I say that because I think what's important about that is the more I tapped into understanding that that was supernatural for me and easy for me to do in some context. It wasn't always easy to be the parent that said no when all of the parents were saying yes, but my intuition was like, not a good idea, right? Especially as she got older. But owning that and trusting in that allowed me to really see like, oh, I actually really can help other people identify and see not just with their kids but within themselves these patterns that exist and like really what's there. So by really like believing that that was truly like I have said for I don't even know how long, forever, I think since my oldest was born, that like God gifted me with that because it was not taught to me. My my um my family didn't demonstrate growing up a lot of love and connection. And so, or I would even say like just presence. And so there were just a lot of things that I felt like were supernatural for me to see, to feel, to sense. And I've brought all of that as I've taken ownership of that. It has really helped me, in supporting other people, especially intuitively, just really feeling into that and like, yeah, it's a gift. And the more I own it, the easier it is to help people.
Yeah. And I love that you're tuning into this intuition and that you've mentioned that several times because I think that is such a key piece. It's kind of inherent in the whole conversation, following the breadcrumbs of yes and tuning
Yeah.
into our gifts. All of that requires intuition. So how have
Hmm.
you developed and cultivated that gift of intuition and how has that served you?
Yeah. Well, I hate to break it to anyone that's listening and is hoping for some magic here, but I will say it's strengthened. I've strengthened it in the last few years by actually not listening to it and not listening to myself, not listening to that voice, and having a lot of kickback from that, right? Where it was like I actually knew in the moment, but I didn't feel strong enough to listen in various situations. So I didn't. And then, you know, um, the negative consequences of that has actually helped me really strengthen that. Um, and that's also changed over the years because I will say, especially with my oldest, um, I remember various situations of her asking to do something, and I just really felt like this is a strong no, and I don't know that there's anything you can tell me to convince me otherwise. And then later she would come and tell me, I'm actually glad I didn't go because ABC happened. And so I would get confirmation like, I don't actually have a reason. So you're asking me for one, but I don't actually have one besides I just know. So there's a little bit of like, I think just in my journey of exploring and testing waters in different areas, I've known and then I've not known or I haven't trusted. And then I feel like I'm back in the space of like, oh, I know, and I will never allow myself to violate that again because it's too costly, right? Not in many ways.
Yeah, sometimes that pain is such a great teacher.
Yeah.
And there is the knowing, and then there is the pain of not following the knowing, and both are, if
Well, they're
abundance is
gifts.
all, yeah, they're gifts. It's a
It
beautiful
is,
gift. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, because
Painful,
I
but
painful,
beautiful.
yeah. But I think that like I think it's sort of like, oh, I know we've talked about this in some context before and probably even use it with our clients, but it is somewhat similar to how do you know pain without pleasure, right? How do you know light without dark? Well, how do I know? Like, how am I so certain about my intuition without the knowing that I've not known it, right? It's that contrast. And so I think maybe as a reminder to everyone that we in almost I probably would say almost every circumstance, contrast is helpful. Not always
Absolutely.
enjoyable, but helpful.
Yes,
Right.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that clarification. Not always enjoyable, but helpful. Yeah, so I'm curious how learning to trust your body and your heart has impacted your ability to listen and respond and cultivate your intuition.
Yeah, and strangely enough, again, I think it's been through the trials and the tribulation that it's given me an expanded awareness of that intuition. And so I okay, ask me again because I feel like there's an answer here that wants to come through, but I need you to ask me again.
Hmm. So, how has learning to listen to your body and heart
Mm,
impacted your ability to strengthen your intuition
yeah, yeah.
and trust your
Um,
intuition?
yeah, I would say even more recently because this has become so evident to me and I've had even more recent experiences where um learning and understanding my body's cues of, kind of what I would like how I term it like my yes and my no and what's right and what's wrong for me. Um and having again those contrasting experiences has really taught me like my body always knows before my mind does, and that's the time to start listening. And it does vary, right? So I'm speaking about that especially in more relative terms related to like my own personal experiences. But even in my coaching containers, just like um I've come to learn to really trust that I don't always know what's best, but God does. And so you and I, we have these experiences all the time where we're just like, that was never a formal thought. It just came out of my mouth. And I don't have an explanation, but I trusted that it just was here and it felt right. And so learning to trust, right, that flow, that frequency, and just allowance is, I think, what's made the biggest difference for me is just continuing to build that trust and not having a really great explanation. And that's usually the evidence, right?
Hmm. It's just that I
So
know, I couldn't tell you why I know, but I know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what advice would you give someone in trusting their body, trusting their heart? Maybe walk us through some of the practices that you have learned to trust yourself a little bit more and trust that intuition in your body.
Yeah. Well, I would say for sure the greatest support around that has been doing the inner work, right? Just kind of like on a regular basis. Not that it has to consume your life, but really, I would say initially what supported me is just constantly questioning my thoughts and if they're true. And because of learning, right, I think it's hard to hear your intuition and hard to be that clear if you're still allowing a lot of doubt and a lot of old history and past and all of those things kind of like are jumbled up in our decision making and our ability to trust. And so I think number one is like commit to doing the inner work, questioning yourself in the beginning just to check in as a check-in process. And I think this is different for everyone. So I think you kind of have to like feel into like what's right, right? So to all you listening, like feeling into like what feels right for you. I on occasion, I'm great at journaling it out, like journaling, this is what I'm feeling, and then just letting whatever comes out and seeing or feeling that what's here, you know, what is trying to be communicated to me, what's the message that, is here to download or um um and a little bit of an experiment, right? It's like there is some experimentation that comes here. Sometimes we're going to get it right. So like you and I use the same language here where we talk about first voice, second voice, and noticing where there's doubt and hearing how do you hear your intuition. So I would even just kind of get curious about that, right? Like for me, it's typically a very quiet, very still voice that only repeats it only you only get it once, right? But other things like doubt, it's ruminating, right? So it's like just learning to decipher, um and and then when you hear that soft still voice, like, okay, I'm gonna follow this breadcrumb, I don't know where it's going, I'm just gonna experiment. So if trusting doesn't feel quite there yet, it's like, can I just experiment with this? Let me just run with it and see what happens, you know? Um, without attachment to the outcome or anything like that. So I think playing with it a little bit, right? And then I don't know, I'm also a verbal processor. So you and I, and I have this channel with other friends where I'm just like, okay, I need to talk about something. I'm feeling through it, but I feel through it sometimes with my voice, right? So I just need to talk it out. And then, as you know, for me, a lot of times it's like, oh, there it is, right? Like what I was sensing finally came out. And so, um, getting to that expression, I think, is also helpful so that you can learn
Absolutely.
to decipher what am I hearing? What am I feeling? Is this, intuition, or is this just some form of me that's doubting or questioning or unsure, right?
Yeah, I see it kind of like a relationship, any relationship that we have, whether it's with a spouse, a partner, a child, ourselves, it requires understanding and learning to listen to that that relationship, that partner, and how they communicate,
Mm-hmm.
their quirks,
Mm-hmm.
their idiosyncrasies,
Yes.
learning to love them for who they are and where they're at. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is a really powerful part. I know it has been for me in just trusting and recognizing that all parts of me are welcome here, and
Yes. Hmm.
loving the parts that feel that I would rather hide, the doubt, the fear, the
Hmm.
insecurity, like they're all here as a gift for me. They're all
Yeah.
here to teach me something. There's a message in the contrast, like you were talking about previously.
Hmm.
And that when we start to learn to accept that individual in the partnership, like in marriage or as
Hmm.
with your children, even when you start
Yeah.
to love them unconditionally. Yes, I don't like your behavior, but I love you.
Hmm.
There is something that opens up that um, there was a quote I heard once where and I'm not going to say the quote exactly, but in essence, it was saying when you feel deeply seen and heard, your wisdom comes through. Your
Hmm.
wisdom can be expressed. And that's what I feel happens with ourselves when we are deeply connected to ourselves
Hmm.
and listen without attachment and with unconditional love, the wisdom can come through.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so much easier and with more clarity. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I do have to say this. Tell us about your new grandbaby and the generational pattern that has ended with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it gives me chills to talk about. I might be a little emotional because it really does mean a lot. So, my I would say my first life goal, I would say that I was like conscious of like conquering was that I would raise her differently and we would stop, the family pattern of teenage pregnancy, unwed. And yeah, and she's 27. She's been married for it'll be 5 years whenever they have the baby. And yeah, the so it's just so exciting. And I think, the cool thing about that is she's 27 and then my other two are 17 and 14. And the really cool thing is that I worked hard, right? I mean, like parenting was hard because I had to learn a lot of new things and do things differently. And that's really the only, like I said, the only thing I knew was that I needed to do things differently. So that was like a moment to moment experience and most of her raising that my other two have been benefactors of. Like I'm kind of already that person, right? So anybody listening, just remembering that um the work does get easier, right? Because I haven't had to be as intentional with them because I've been a different person already. So that was like even the blessing in disguise of having this age gap. But yeah, it's super exciting that generational pattern of ending that. I'm like it's so exciting. And yeah, like it's so funny too, because people, will say, "You're so young to be a grandma." And I'm like, I know, but my mom was a grandma before she was 40. And I like, so like this is still a big deal. It's still such a big deal. Yeah,
And it speaks right back to that gift that you were so gently reminded of, that what impact that generational pattern being broken will have not just on your immediate family but for generations to come. And
totally. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's actually something I feel like I keep at the front and center for me too, is just remembering, there's research that shows that we, like our generational impact is 4 to 7 generations from now. So I think about that a lot, right? Like, um, doing the work that I'm doing, the inner work and the way I interact, even though that element of generational patterning has been, kind of like corrected, there are still other things that we all carry from generational and societal, conditioning that I feel like I'm still working on, right? There are still things I'm conscious of that I'm like, okay, those are still here and present. We're still working on those things. And some of that is just my other two daughters really knowing their value and their worth, right? Without relationship or attachment or connection to external things, right? So I think there's still a lot of work for all of us to do in the generational um, patterning idea, right? So I think that like all of that's still really important to stay connected to, and so I'm still very connected. It's just it looks a little different now because that hump, right? That was a big one to me. And the thing I told my daughter, I remember this early on that I said, it's a choice, number one. And there's one, I guess maybe two things I know. One is life is already hard enough, and you can have a child whenever you want, but life's harder, right? When you have another human to take care of and think about and consider and like all of the things. And I'm simply trying to offer you an opportunity for something simpler on the other side, a little bit easier when you're further along and more established and all that, right? So yeah, so I think again, there's still generational things to continue to look at, and that's like where my focus continues to be.
Yeah. And that is the work that you're doing now is helping your clients break those generational patterns.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're carrying that wisdom of your own journey, your own extraordinary into the work that you're doing now.
Hmm.
So how have you seen breaking generational patterns impact your clients? How has that served them?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I get chills like, so and I think for every client it's a little bit different, but because their life stories are all different. But a couple that really come to mind for me is I have one client. She has three daughters, and I still get messages that are from her today that are just like, so thank you so much for teaching me what you taught me, for helping me what you helped me with, because the way I can communicate and interact with my daughters now is so vastly different, not just from who I was before, but from my own childhood, right? Like she's got a very solid ability to compare and contrast, past and present. And to me that means a lot because I think all in all, the way we interact with anyone is important and leaves a generational imprint, right? But I think the greatest impact we have as a parent is the generational impact that we make, or the impact, not even just generational impact that we make on our kids. Not just on ourselves, right? But like the world. And so I think about that as like the ripple effect, right? Of like I helped one person, but she has three daughters, right? Like that's a big deal because now her daughters, who are all, I mean, I think the youngest one just graduated last year. And so, they're going out into the world and they're developing relationships. And now they get to have more conscious relationships, right? They get to choose from a more healthy place within themselves. Um, and I would say that's the impact, like similarly across the board, whether it's um, a more mature woman. I do have that in my space too, who her kids aren't at home, but she's still navigating how to interact with her kids in a way that allows her to feel like she's impacting, right, that lineage. And so, and again, it's that ripple effect. It just makes such a difference. And I think the more of us that can really connect to that and accept that as maybe our first assignment while we're here on planet Earth is that we're here to raise good humans. And
Here,
it takes,
here.
yeah, and that again, the challenge of that is it requires us to look at, okay, how are we doing that? Right? Are we are we parenting from love or fear? Are we parenting from control or trust? Right? Like there are so many nuances inside that, but I think it's also important, and that's the impact. And it just like, gosh, my heart just swells.
Absolutely. So, as we kind of wrap up our conversation today, we talked about this briefly at the beginning before we hit record, but none of the women that I coach or interact with who are doing extraordinary things feel like they start their journey as an extraordinary woman. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
women that I work with or interact with see themselves as pretty ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what advice would you offer to my listeners who feel this nudge and who also feel pretty ordinary?
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you offer to them as they navigate this path and do their extraordinary work, whatever that looks like?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the first step, number one, is recognizing that extraordinary doesn't have to mean that you're on prime time television, or you're an Oprah or Tony Robbins, or any of like the big gurus, right? That are they're obviously making an impact, but I think that defining for you what extraordinary means and how do you want to step into that version of yourself, right? I think that's actually really important so that you're always aligned with what that vision is for you, and you're not taken off course by, again, your ego. And so I think that step one. And maybe step one is also actually, I think it's sort of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. I think number one might be believing that you have a purpose and that your story and you matter, right? Like your energy, your imprint, your gift matters. And it might matter to 10 people, it might matter to 100 people, but it matters. It matters, right? You're here for a reason. And I think owning that and then trusting, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be a big deal or not, but I'm just going to follow the breadcrumbs and we're going to find out.
Love that. I love that. Well, Denise, this has been just such an enjoyable conversation. And I know we both could sit and talk for hours and hours and hours about this topic because we have.
Yes, yes. This would be the never ending podcast if we didn't
Yes.
stop.
But I really appreciate your insights and your wisdom and just the heart of who you are. It radiates through everything that you do and everything that you say and just who you are in the world. So I'm just so grateful that my listeners get the opportunity to hear you and your story and that your little pearls of wisdom can help them on their journey to
Yeah.
extraordinary. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. It's
of
been so
course.
awesome. I've loved seeing your face as always. And so, yeah, this has been wonderful.
Yeah. And I will put in the show notes a way that you can connect with Denise. She is an amazing coach and she does incredible work in generational patterning and helping her clients just show up as who they are designed to be. So if you want to connect with her in any way, I will put her Instagram and Facebook um, handles in the show notes so that you can connect with her. But she's a beautiful human. So
Yeah. Thank you so much.
you are welcome. Thank you all for being here today. As always, rate, review, share this with someone who is on their journey of extraordinary. Send it to someone and let them know I see you as extraordinary. That has been the most powerful and beautiful journey. Part of my journey is being surrounded by women who I see as extraordinary and who see the extraordinary in me. So hope you've been inspired by today and we'll see you next time. Thanks all.